guys. So this is Module 4, Presentation 2, and we're going to talk more about what therapeutic use of self is. So what I want you to do here in this question of the slide is just type in what are the results of your personality test. You just have to give the 4 initial letters, and then in the first discussion thread, you're going to actually post a little bit more information about what your personality traits say about you. But we're going to talk a little bit more about this in detail. So there's 5 personality aspects that are mind, energy, nature, tactics, and identities. And I want you to think of each of these as kind of a 2-sided continuum. So there's a neutral option placed in the middle of the percentages, and then there's the high end and the low end. After completing the test, you're going to identify what percentage you are under one of these areas and what categories you fall under. And this is going to show how strong your preferences are. Now, this is kind of a fun little activity. When you get into your senior year, you're going to actually be taking another personality profile. So if you want to keep this information, it'll be kind of nice to compare to when you're a senior to see what your results are there as well. But we're going to break down and talk about what each of these personality aspects mean. So when we talk about mind, this is how we interact with our surroundings. You've probably heard the term, are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? That's what this is looking at. The next area is energy, which looks at how we see the world and how we process information. There's 2 categories that this is broken down to. The first is an observant. People with that characteristic tend to be practical or pragmatic or down to earth, or else intuitive, which means that the individual is imaginative, open-minded, and curious. The third one is nature. This aspect determines how we make decisions and how we cope with our emotions. So again, there's 2 different areas, the thinkers or the feelers. The thinkers tend to be objective and rational, and they hide their emotions. And then feelers tend to be sensitive, have emotional expression, are empathetic, and less competitive. The fourth one is tactics. This aspect reflects our approach to work, what our planning and decision-making abilities are. Again, categorized into 2 areas when you're looking at the spectrum. Okay, remember there's a neutral in the middle, and then there's on either side there's a different spectrum. Judging or being flexible. If you're judging, you tend to be decisive, highly organized, and perspective. And then judging is decisive and highly organized. And then perspective is flexible and nonconformist. They tend to see opportunities and they can tend to improvise. So under tactics, I just want to make sure I have this clear. It's either judging or being perspective. And the last one in this section is identifying. So this aspect underpins all others, and it shows how confident we are in our abilities and our decision-making skills. You can be classified as an A, which signifies assertive, or a T, which signifies turbulent. An assertive person tends to be self-assured, even-tempered, and resistant to stressors. Somebody who is turbulent or classified as being turbulent are individuals that are self-conscious and often sensitive to high levels of stress. The next looks at the personality profiles. I'm not going to go through each one of these to talk specifically about all of the subcontents because it is listed under your individual description of your personality profiles. But I will just share what they are. So you can be an analyst, which tends to have the characteristics of being architectural, somebody that's very logical, commandeering, or a debater. A person that has a diplomat personality profile tends to be an advocator or a mediator, protagonist, or a campaigner. A sentinel tends to be somebody who is very logistic, defender. They tend to have that executive mindset, and they tend to console or tend to have that console kind of personality. If you're an explorer, you tend to be like a virtuoso, an adventurer, an entertainer, and an interpreter. So again, I want you to think about what your personality characteristics are. So this is my profile. So I am actually an ESFP-A. So remembering that the -A or a -T would signify if I was assertive or turbulent. I am 65% in the assertive range. But breaking it down more, so I am an extrovert, meaning that I'm very outgoing. I like to talk to people. I seek out talking to people. Even if there's people I don't know, I want to try to get to know them. That tends to be my personality. 85% is pretty accurate. As for being an observer, I am very observant. I love to not just people watch, which I do enjoy that too, but I like to see how things work. I like to see how people work. I like to see how they move, how they complete a task. I enjoy that very much. Then the next category is feeling. So remember, you could be either a thinker or a feeler, and then the percentage rates how strong that personality trait is. I do tend to make decisions based on how I feel about things versus the analytical part of thinking about things. So I'm like, oh, I don't feel like wearing this today, so I'm going to change my clothes. That tends to be my kind of personality. I have a friend of mine, actually, who is a coworker. She's a faculty member, and she sets out her clothes for the entire week. She also prepares her meals for the entire week. She is definitely a thinker, where I can't do that because I tend to wake up in the morning and say, what do I feel like eating today? Or what do I feel like wearing today? Nothing wrong with either one of them. That's just a personality trait that we would have. When we talk about perspective, this is looking if you are flexible and how you're able to see opportunities or improvise. And I tend to be the kind of person that is pretty flexible. And the last part, as we mentioned, is assertive. I'm pretty self-assured. I tend to be even-tempered. I don't really get upset about things, and I don't really deal with a lot of stress in my life. So I'm going to have you, if you haven't yet done so, you're going to just write down a mini component about your profile here in this question, but we're going to have you write more information in the discussion thread in this module. Okay, so after completing the personality quiz, I want you to think about how can you work within a group with different strengths and weaknesses. So these are working with, think of maybe a class that you've been in previously, and you're working in a group setting. Chances are each person in that group does not have the same personality profile. What are some strengths and weaknesses with working with people that have different strengths and weaknesses than you do? The next question, how can your personal strengths and weaknesses help you in your personal and in your professional lives? Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about therapeutic use of self. So you might say to yourself, what on earth does therapeutic use of self mean? Basically, it's a term that is used by therapists to kind of explain what conscious effort we have in optimizing our interactions with our clients. I don't know if that sounds Latin to you, but basically it's using our own personality, our own strengths to communicate and help our clients deal with maybe a situation that is very hard for them to deal with. So the definition, actually by Punwar and Pelequin, states that therapeutic use of self is a practitioner's planned use of his or her personalities, insights, and perceptions and judgment as part of the therapeutic process. So where did this theory come from? It's derived from psychology and psychotherapy, and it's really fundamental to the practice of most any other health professions. When we talk about research shows that they sampled 120, well, Cole and McLean. They had done a study back in 2003. It's a little old, but I think it's still kind of true today, although there's not a lot of new studies that have come about with this. But they sampled 129 OTs. They found that 96.5 deemed that therapeutic relationships were really critical in the fundamental performance of the therapy session. Similarly, in the context of the United States, Taylor and et al., Taylor is very popular in terms of this kind of research and content. They questioned 568 OTs and found more than 80% felt that therapeutic use of self was the most important skill in their practice. That's pretty strong. 80% of therapists that were identified out of that 568 believed that therapeutic use of self was the most important skill in their practice. That means that this didn't have to do with an occupation-based activity. It didn't have to do with strengthening. It didn't have to do with a cognitive skill. It didn't have to do with adaptive equipment. It was really the therapist's use of themselves in that relationship with that client that was the most important skill in that therapy session. That's pretty important. What I want you to do is, at this moment, think about this finding and think about what your personality profile identified and how you might be able to bring this forward into a therapeutic relationship. Take some time to think, reflect, and then just put down maybe a couple of sentences of how you think that this will make a difference and how you might be as an OT. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit more about the intentional relationship model. Now we're going to break it down, okay? So when we talk about IRM, is what we call it, it's designed to complement and be used in the conjunction with existing models of practice. We're going to talk about models of practice in the next module. But really, the IRM is the core focus of how we develop and manage skills to facilitate and maintain a therapeutic relationship with our clients. There are 6 key interpersonal skills or modes of practice that we identify when working with our client. And we're going to go over each one of them now. So the 6 modes. The first one is advocating. So when we look at advocating, this is really how an OT ensures that the client knows what his or her rights are. And this is also the OT ensures and educates the client on resources and helps to identify supports within that client's environment. The next mode of practice is collaborating. This is where the client takes an active role in the treatment, and the OT facilitates autonomy and encourages the client to have and make choices that are best for them. The third is empathizing. This is where the OT strives to understand the client's perspective and experiences without judgment. They validate the client's feelings and provide summary statements. They listen, and then they can sometimes mirror the client's affect. Remember the difference between affect and effect. Affect is more of that perception and feeling of, so when we're talking about this in this context, is we're listening and we're reflecting and we're mirroring what the client's feeling. What is their affect? The fourth one is encouraging. This is instilling hope to the client within the context of what we can expect the client's progress to be, and emphasizing their strengths and accomplishments, communicating joy, pleasure, and using an appropriate sense of humor as appropriate with the client. Now, when you bring humor into a therapy session, you have to make sure that it's appropriate for that individual client, because some people's humor is not received as well as somebody is executing that humor. I know for one, I am not one that can share a lot of jokes, or I'm not a quick-witted kind of person. So I really have to watch myself, because if I try to engage in humor, sometimes it comes out a little snooty or a little snotty, which is not my intention. So I have to really be cautious of that. I've learned that over time. The next one is instructing. This is where the OT provides active and directive role in the client's care, And we provide clear instructions, feedback, and we also set limits in order for our client to regain or gain the highest level of occupational performance possible. The last one here is problem solving. So what we do is we support the client in thinking through the different options that are available to them, comparing those outcomes, and providing supportive analytical thinking in order for them to make the best decision that is available to them at the time. So now we're going to think about the setup when we think about self-reflection and the use of these 6 modes. So when we do this, when we think about what self-reflection is it's thinking about, we're going to go to the next slide for a minute. It's thinking about, what am I doing? Am I living up to the best core values and personal mission? Am I being the best person that others can respect? Am I respecting my client in the way that I should? And am I meeting all the expectations that I set for others around me? Am I performing to my peak capacity? Am I giving my client, family, and friends the most and my best? And am I on the path to my preferred future? I am a huge proponent of self-reflection. I reflect on things all the time. I can't even tell you a time that I don't reflect on, honestly. When I'm in a classroom setting and I am teaching a class, I leave that class and I ask myself, did I do the best that I could? Is there a better way that I could have communicated information? How did I deal with a situation that came up in class? How might I better that? Even within a therapy session, I do the same thing. I leave a therapy session. Did I give it my best? Is there anything that I could have done better? So on and so forth. So I am continually using the exercise of self-reflection. Okay, so when we're practicing self-reflection within the modes, we're going to look at 3 different key components. We're going to be looking at the client scenario. This is where we describe the client, we describe the content, and we really identify what that client's behavior is. Then we have to figure out what mode choice are we going to use. Thinking back on those 6 modes of practice: advocating, collaborating, empathizing, encouraging, instructing, and problem solving. Which mode are we going to use? Why did we choose those modes? And what communication and actions were used? Were we in mode together, meaning that was the client and myself, or the therapist, in conjunction and in collaboration using modes together? We're only going to get that answer by looking at the next section here, which is the client's response. How did you expect the client to respond to your mode choice? How did the client respond? Was the mode effectively used, and how do we know? These are things that we need to take into account when we're using self-reflection in order to determine and promote the best use of our therapy session, the best use of time and purpose within that therapy session. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we have 3 different examples, video examples. The first video example is, and I'd like you to go in order, is looking at a therapeutic conversation with a grumpy patient. I'm going to have you look at this on your own because I don't think we need to look at 12 minutes of videos together, but these are posted on the PowerPoint presentation, so please be sure to look at these and then come back and answer the questions. But you're going to look at this grumpy patient, and then you're going to determine what is the scenario, what was the mode choices that were used, and what was the client's response. And then did that client response appropriately match what the therapist or the acted therapist was performing? Okay. The second video is a nurse and an angry patient. And this is actually divided into 2 different sections. So the first section is kind of the nurse from hell, honestly. And the second one is the nurse is much more empathetic for their client or for their patient. So I want you to look at both of these and really show a comparison and a contrast of what that nurse was using when responding with that patient, and how the outcome was different. The third one is looking at the therapy session with a gentleman who likes golf. This is an occupational therapy session, and this is actually a real session. The other two are simulated by students, but this third one is actually a therapist that is having a therapy session with a gentleman who likes golf. And again, I want you to look at those three key components. What is the scenario? What are the mode choices that were used? And then what is the client's response? Okay. In doing this, what you're going to do is this will be the second part of the discussion in Module 4. So you're going to look at these videos, and then under each, or in the module, in your second discussion post, you're going to break it down and talk about the 3 videos using those 3 modes of, or those 3 practice modes: the client scenario, the mode choice, and the client response. Okay. For this module, there are some assignments that are coming up. So continue to read Tuesdays with Maury. And also, you're going to complete 2 activity analysis. The first activity analysis is going to be completed on a video that is posted on Moodle. After I have graded that and provided feedback, you can then complete the second activity analysis, and you're going to do that on an activity of your choice. Please wait for the feedback from me from your first activity analysis before completing your second one, because I want to make sure that you can use that feedback in order to better your understanding of the content and information, as well as ultimately improving your grade if needed. So please let me know if you have any questions about this, and I'll be talking to you soon. Thanks, guys.